curing cancer first, because that's a bigger one, and it's a more important headline. I listened to you on Tucker, and I thought it was a fascinating discussion. And all I could think was this amazing magical thing that you've found, that you've decided, to study and actually come up with. Everyone wants it. Everyone's going to want it once they hear about it. And my biggest question is, how can it be mass produced such that we can all shore up our T cells and fight cancer and COVID hangovers and spiked cells, whatever that we were caused from the vaccine or weren't. So let's just start with, what is it exactly, this thing? Because you invented other cancer drugs that you literally sold your companies for $10 billion for. You're the real deal. You've been honored by everybody, a legit and world-renowned doctor. So you made plenty of money, but you kept studying cancer and how to cure it. And you've come up with this very special thing.
So, well, first of all, thank you for that. That's very generous. I did not invent this. God invented this. So this is what I want to explain. When I sold my companies in 2008, 2010, I realized, and this has been now a life's work, that we have in our body a cell that God created, and it is 450 million years old, called the natural killer cell. And that cell was only discovered in the 1970s, and I wrote my first paper in the 1990s. And what this is the enlightenment of how do we activate the cell that God created in us, and why does the cell exist? And this cell exists because it is here to prevent us from having cancer. This cell exists is to prevent us from dying from an infection, from sepsis, from COVID, from bacteria, from fungus. And what's happened now is an enlightenment after 30 years of work of how to activate that cell with a single jab. And that's what we've discovered. So what's exciting is we have within our body this immune system that's been around. Everybody understands T cells. Everybody understands, but nobody ever thought about the word natural killer cells. And that's the name of the cell. It's the natural killer cell. It is the first responder in your body to recognize anything that's dangerous and kill it. That's the only way that mammalians actually evolved to live today. So when you said I invented it, what this is really is an enlightenment of going from toxic chemotherapy, radiation, to really using your body itself as the protector against cancer.
So what is it? I mean, I know it's called BioShield, but what exactly is it, and how does it work?
So now that we understand that you have a cell in your body, you and I have a cell in your body, what nobody has figured out is what's the receptor on that cell that if you put a protein into your body, that your body is making right now. Your body is making a protein called IL-15, interleukin 15. That's what your body is generating. But it's generating it, and it lasts for maybe a minute, so that it activates the cell when you need it. If I could create that protein and inject it, and it could last 7 to 14 days, and supercharge all these natural killer and T cells with a single jab, that is the BioShield. So the BioShield is the key to unlocking the proliferation of these cells. And what's exciting is that this has now been approved for bladder cancer. Mm-hmm. And what's exciting is we've shown that patients with bladder cancer, when we give it in 2015, not only are still alive, have never lost their bladder, and are free of disease. Which means then this key of this IL-15, which is in the little vial and given subcutaneously, is the BioShield.
So is it something that you would take prophylactically, just in case, just because you don't want to get cancer, or you're just worried about the COVID vaccine or having had COVID? Or is it something you would only take when you've been diagnosed with cancer and you don't know what to do?
So, you ask such great questions, because we just finished completely accruing a trial for patients who don't have cancer. patients with Lynch syndrome, which affects 1 in 280 Americans in the United States. So we were chosen by the National Cancer Institute, and just last week, 100% accrual across the nation, in which the patients get this jab to ensure that they don't, or to explore that they don't get cancer. If you really get deep into what this BioShield is as you age, your natural killer cells and T cells begin to drop. So the problem is, as your natural killer cells and T cells drop, that's when you actually lose the immune system that protects yourself, and that's how you also get cancer. So cancer is, in fact, a collapse of this immune system. And if that's the case, then this is maybe the key, not to fountain of youth, but the key to longevity in the sense of prolonging life, while to extend and protect the immune system. Mm-hmm. What's remarkable, it's hidden in plain sight when you say, do we need this? When we take a simple blood test called a CBC, which is done hundreds of thousands of times a day in the United States to measure hemoglobin, there is a count in that test called the absolute lymphocyte count, ALC, that sadly today 99% of the doctors in the United States don't pay attention to that, not because they're not smart, because there was no treatment until today in the history of medicine to unlock, if you have a low ALC, to improve that ALC count. That's what has happened as of today. And during this administration, I'm hopeful that the FDA would recognize that what we have is a paradigm change of how to look at patients, whether they have cancer, infection, sepsis, in the ICU, or even aged.
So when you see this ALC count on anybody, whether it's a seemingly healthy individual or someone you know has cancer, you could see a number, and I'm sure there's just a range, and if you fall, below the acceptable range, you're at risk, and that would be a potential candidate for this biostrike.
Incredibly correct, in the sense that the range is, if you go below 1,000, so the normal range is between 1,000 to 4,000. If you go below the 1,000, the statistical analysis that's been shown now remarkably in about 200 to 300 publications is that you have a statistical analysis opportunity to actually have a shortened lifespan. So this lower ALC, or if you drop below 1,000, the medical term for that is lymphopenia. So if you were to Google lymphopenia, remarkably, you'd see papers going all the way to 1990s that if you have lymphopenia for breast cancer, lymphopenia for pancreas cancer, lymphopenia for lung cancer, any cancers you want to choose, your survival rate is significantly and statistically shortened. And that makes so much sense, because what ALC is actually is your lymphocytes and your T cells. And the lymphocytes and T cells are the only cells that really matter to prevent infection, to prevent cancer, to treat the cancer, to prevent metastasis. So it is so obvious from my perspective, it's simple and yet profound, that we've unlocked a paradigm change where we treat the host, i.e. the immune system, rather than the disease. In fact, the disease of cancer is really the symptom. The root cause of the disease is the collapse of the immune system.
Mm-hmm. So I heard you telling Tucker that you'd never had COVID, and he said, you're lucky. And you said, it's not luck. It's this. It's my T cells. And that made me wonder whether, like I was saying, can anybody get this? Like, did you have low ALC and therefore you did the injection on yourself, or did you just take it when COVID was circulating?
So there's two things about T cells. And so the BioShield is a platform. The one hand, what I talk about now is this IL-15 that actually proliferates and supercharges, and that's approved.
IL-15, that's what you call the drug?
It's called Anktiva.
Okay.
I'm trying not to give you a commercial name.
Okay.
But that's what, but that's what it's called. It's Anktiva. It's the activated NK cell for T cell for life. That's what Anktiva is.
Makes sense.
And it's this IL-15 in a little vial, literally half a cc injected subcutaneously. And it acts amazingly because that's what God's given us. So again, coming full circle to, did I invent this? No, God invented this. What we did was enlighten ourselves to figure out what key we needed to activate what's in your body. But imagine if we could not only activate those T cells, but educate the T cells before we activate them. Educate them to recognize a specific antigen. And that's what we're doing in Lynch syndrome. Patients with Lynch syndrome have about 80% increase of colon cancer. So we pre-activate their T cells so they can recognize a T cell against the colon cancer. So one of the things on COVID could, and we can talk a little bit about that, and I spoke at great length to Peter Marks and to Fauci and to Collins, to the entire NIH and NID during the Biden administration as well, that we need a T-cell vaccine. And I think I sent you the YouTube where John Cohen from Science and myself and Peter Marks in 2022 did this interview begging the country to get the T-cell vaccine. So what I did is I built this T-cell vaccine. And by the way, as you remember, billions of dollars were made available. And I'm proud to say it was difficult, that we've never used one single penny of government money, partly because we never received one single penny of government money, so that I could have the freedom to actually build what I needed to build, what I think was right for the human race. Because my concern was that the current vaccines, the antibody-based vaccines, would not stop transmission. By that I mean, you'd get this vaccine, it maybe would block a little bit, but the virus would get in, it would grow, it would use your body to grow, and you would transmit it to another person. And my greatest fear would be not only it would grow, it would persist. And if it persists, now you have autoimmune disease, inflammatory disease, and even potentially turbo cancers. So the solution to that, and the solution was facing us in 2021, 2022, was to develop a vaccine that would stimulate the T cells and NK cells, but the T cells would be educated against the COVID nuclear capsid. So the COVID has two proteins inside it. One is spike, and one on the inner core of the COVID called the nuclear capsid. And if you could create a T cell vaccine to the nuclear capsid, you may have a universal T cell vaccine to any COVID comes along, because that nuclear capsid doesn't change. That spike mutates all the time. We had developed that vaccine and completed phase 1, and I injected myself to test that I would have T cells against that COVID antigen, and I do. Remarkably, the FDA put us on hold when I asked to use that as a booster. So to this day, nobody could explain the reason during that time frame. And so it was never developed.
Wow. Is there any chance it could be developed and used now? Because people are still getting the COVID boosters. We just saw in the news today that Moderna just received the full US FDA approval. Like it had been on the emergency use authorization. Now it's fully approved. They're still pushing this thing on people. But we have a new administration. We have a new great head of FDA. So is there a chance it still could come to life?
The answer is yes. In fact, I was so desperate that I'm willing to give it away. Literally give it away. I actually, during COVID time, had another molecule called the ACE2 decoy that I approached, and I won't name him, a major CEO, and said, please take this, please grow this. This is not about money. This is not about driving more revenue to the company, even though Moderna and BioNTech and Pfizer have really benefited largely from that. This is almost from a virus versus man, and this is for humanity, where really we need to find a way where what scared me, and we can get into this, Megyn, this ACE2 receptor. This is not a respiratory virus. This virus is like cancer. This virus gets into every part of your body. And when it gets there, it uses your body as a factory. Whether it would be the virus or whether it be the spike protein of this mRNA vaccine. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's what scared me. And sadly, I'm now seeing the fruits of what this virus is doing. And this virus has really beaten us. We have the opportunity to fix it still. This administration has the opportunity to fix it still. The science is complex. And the question is, will the FDA even understand this science? Is the current and old FDA equipped and modernized sufficiently? And I see Marty Makary trying to improve the modernization with AI, etc. I think that's wonderful. But the real modernization this FDA needs is to understand the science. And I don't think this FDA has actually grown sufficiently fast enough with sufficient, I don't want to say the word intellect, with sufficient expertise to understand the evolution of the science at the molecular level, at the immunology level.
Well, what do you make of
drugs?
I think of Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who of course is running NIH, and he too was screwed by Francis Collins, his predecessor, as I know you were. Collins was afraid of you. He perceived you as some sort of a threat, and you discovered evidence that he intentionally meant to undermine you and freeze you out. And that's exactly what happened to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who was running around during COVID, wisely saying we shouldn't be quarantining all healthy people. We should be doing focused protection, protecting only the most vulnerable. And Francis Collins and Fauci made it clear they wanted to smear him as some sort of an extremist, a fringe doctor. So what about him? Could he be of help? I'm not saying Marty Makary wouldn't be helpful to you, but you're suggesting maybe there isn't the manpower at the FDA to actually see this through. How about Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and going bigger over at the NIH?
No, I'm hopeful of that. And that's why, I was very, very supportive of Bobby Kennedy becoming HHS and bringing on the right people. I've not yet met Jay, and I look forward to meeting him. And you're completely right. And that's one of the few tweets I made, very sort of politically correct, that so few people could hurt so many. And they did. The time frame you're relating to is President Trump's first term. When he was president-elect, apparently I was considered and nominated to be the head of NIH. Francis Collins heard about that and had a very active campaign trying to smear me. It turned out anyway, I said to the president then, I really need to work on what is now the BioShield, thinking he would have 2 terms, and in the second term, he'd be on the path to the cure of cancer. And he didn't win the second term, but interestingly enough, serendipitously, it allowed me more time, and we are now ready. So while the previous administration, literally during the Biden years, we were canceled, literally canceled, the opportunity now to take all the work and put us on the path in this administration. I think only this administration can make this all work. We could find the treatment to prevent this COVID from, find a universal COVID vaccine. We could actually treat patients with long COVID, and we can actually be on the path literally to the cure of cancer. So, and even the prevention of cancer. It would require really a deep understanding of the science, but more importantly, require a deep understanding at the FDA level. Megyn, my fear is as follows. I met the president in Riyadh and I met the president in Qatar, and I'm watching China really explode in terms of their science. And my fear is as follows, is that America has the scientific and intellectual lead, but China's going to beat us. And the reason they're going to beat us is because the regulatory process is completely related to actually advancing technology. Our regulatory process is stuck in this old dogma and stuck in checking the box and stuck without recognizing the science. So my fear is that we will not only lose jobs, we will lose the biotech industry, and we'll lose the race. Not because we don't have ingenuity, not because we don't have the best brains and the best scientists, and not because we don't have the will or the resources, as now President Trump has put forth, but because we'll have a regulatory obstruction.
Mm-hmm. I heard you discussing this protocol and how many people it's helped already. You mentioned, for example, Harry Reid, who had a very bad diagnosis, and he came to you and you gave him the BioStrike, however we want to refer to it, and extended his life, we believe, by a couple of years. I mean, it's not going to help anybody live forever, but when you might otherwise be facing the end, this drug actually seems to have a proven record, you say, of extending one's life by years.
Well, so when Senator Reid came to see me, he already completed all his standard of care and had failed his standard of care and then came to see me. So what we needed to do, in 2015, I went to the FDA and said, listen, I have this hypothesis that what we're doing is completely wrong. When we give chemotherapy, we wipe out all the natural killer cells and T cells. When we give radiation, we wipe out all the natural killer cells and T cells. And I would like to try this in patients before they get these horrible treatments, i.e. at the time of diagnosis. And they said no, and it's appropriate. You need to try this first in patients who are at the end stage of their life. So we did this in triple-negative breast cancer patients, Merkel cell cancer patients, pancreatic cancer patients, glioblastoma patients, bladder cancer patients, all who had failed all standards of care. But by the time they came to see us, their immune system was completely collapsed. So we had to start from a deep hole, but able to get them out of the hole and then get them into positions of complete remission. So let me give you some examples. We got complete remissions on patients with Merkel cell carcinoma, fifth line, and he lived for 6 years and didn't die of his cancer. Complete remission on patients with bladder cancer, and they're still alive now, 10 and 11 years old. Complete remissions on triple-negative breast cancer. We have metastatic pancreatic cancer, patient with free of disease after 5 years, and she's still alive. We just published that 6 years out.
Wow.
So the proof of principle has gone beyond the proof of principle. We then got this approved despite, and we'll talk about that, the problems that they put me through from 2021 to 2024. And after 700,000 pages of response, we got it approved late 2024. Now that this administration is here, we literally have the opportunity to really understand that we are on the precipice of treating sepsis. I just saw the results yesterday of a patient that we treated just last month with this valley fever, with an inflamed lung on the ventilator for an entire month. And with the last rites, we cleared up this lung completely. We have then patients now that we have with bladder cancer and for pancreatic cancer ongoing, and for lung cancer. So my frustration is, how do I get this insight out into both the scientific and medical community, and most important, the regulatory committees, so they can understand what's at hand and what's at our fingertips.
It's so discouraging that this didn't happen under the Biden administration, when Biden had literally been tasked by then President Obama to take the cancer moonshot. I mean, it was promised to us at the State of the Union that he was going to be the one to spearhead the effort to cure cancer, which sounded like a pipe dream, of course, but at least it was a goal that seemed like, all right, maybe we'll see some real advancements in the fight. And all this time later, he becomes the actual president, and you came to them and said, I've got something. And you got nowhere. And now we have President Trump in there. And have you been stiff-armed already by the FDA? Is that why you have doubts about, the scientists there now? or have you just been not able to penetrate the wall?
I would say both. Okay,
Wow.
let's go back a little bit in history here. The cancer moonshot is very interesting history. In 2015, when Beau Biden unfortunately had glioblastoma, then Vice President Biden asked me to come to Washington to help him take care with Kevin Johnson, Beau Biden, at the Walter Reed. And unfortunately, Beau Biden then passed away after having received treatment from a institution from Texas. That time, he then asked me to convene a meeting in his residence in December 2015 of how I thought cancer should be treated. And my naive way would said, I will convene this meeting by bringing all the major pharmaceutical companies together, which I did, into that room. I'll bring the FDA into that room. It was on the head of the FDA. I'll bring the National Cancer Institute into that room. And he hosted this massive meeting, which in his residence as vice president, and then asked me to chair the meeting. At that meeting, everybody agreed that we all going to be working together because there's no one company that had all the resources and the technology to fight this war on cancer. And I purported my hypothesis that we're going to change from chemotherapy and radiation into the immune system. He agreed that I can announce the cancer moonshot on January, I think, 15th, I forget what, 12th of the next year, which I then put out an article to the New York Times. Francis Collins heard about that. I announced the moonshot on Monday. On Tuesday, or that evening, or Monday, Tuesday night, I forget the dates, President Obama announced the second moonshot with Biden as the head and Francis Collins running that. It didn't matter to me that there now were two moonshots because my goal was to actually find a cure. So I think what happened thereafter, the big pharma companies pulled out for whatever motivation. And thank God I had the resources just to pursue it myself.
To keep going. I mean, I
did.
think we can safely assume it was pressure from Francis Collins. That's my assumption because he's a bully. We saw that behind the scenes during COVID many, many times. He got drunk on his own power. He felt like he was a god. He would make or break careers. He would dictate what was happening in big pharma. And there's no reason not to assume he did the same thing to you if you were on parallel paths toward the cancer moonshot. This is my supposition. But in my opinion, he's a villain.
Well, I actually, interesting, not because I did it, somebody sent me a Freedom of Information Act email in which he in his email said, alarms bells going on that Patrick Shiong is going to be head of NIH. You must find a way to stop him. That's what the email said.
Not surprised one bit. Not surprised one bit.
Well, and that's why I said you get drunk with power. I completely agree with you. You get drunk with power. And the idea of what happens in Washington, you have this power over so many. But really, at the end of the day, I'm pursuing my life as a physician scientist, and the greatest joy for me is to sort of see the impact as I'm really seeing. You know, look, I'm still seeing patients. I'm sure if you realize, Megyn, but we have a clinic and I still see patients. And to me, the greatest joy and also the greatest fear, I'm now seeing younger and younger patients. The last 2 weeks ago, I saw 3 women in my clinic simultaneously. They're all in the 30s, 31, 30, 31, with severe cancers.
What kind of cancers?
So they had lung cancer, breast cancer, and brain tumor.
Oh, my God.
3 different cancers.
Why? Why is this? I mean, I know that's a longer question, but why are so many young people developing such aggressive cancers nowadays?
I have a theory, and right now I'm sort of 90% sure of the theory. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm a scientist, so I'm calling it a theory. I was always fearful that this virus and even this vaccine could actually be persistent in your body, like HPV. You know, there are viruses that are oncogenic, like hepatitis. You would understand that. There's HPV. You would understand that. But this is a very different virus because it has a thing called ACE2 receptor, which means it's in places like your colon, your muscle, your blood vessel, your heart. But more importantly, we now begin to discover that you have even more proteins in your body or enzymes in your body that cleaves the spike protein and allows even more entry into every part of your body, specifically the prostate, the colon, the pancreas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So is this, unfortunately, what I said to Tucker Carlson, the non-infectious pandemic that we begin to see? This non-infectious pandemic of cancer, I believe, sadly, is upon us. The good news, thank God, we have a solution for these things.
Keep going.
No, I'm good. I think it really bothers me, as you could sort of see. I'm frustrated, but also scared at the same time that, you know, cancer is a war against time. We do not have time, but we have the insight. I just hope that somehow, somewhere, and hopefully I'll have Secretary Kennedy host a scientific meeting, we have to be driven by the science. And the science is so complex because it's very fundamental basic immunology, crossed over with virology, crossed over with oncology. And you're a lawyer, so you would understand that you have great specialties within their fields and you have generalists. But this is so deep, it's broad and deep and has implications all the way through that is now, I wouldn't call it existential, but could affect tens of millions, billions of people on the planet.
Just to back up, because you're talking about the COVID virus, can this be happening, this problem that you outlined inside of our bodies, including young people's bodies, as a result of both COVID and the vaccine? Will both of those do it? Or do people who have had COVID but not the vaccine not need to worry?
It is fundamental, the spike protein. So where does the spike protein come from? Whether you have vaccination or whether you have the infection. So this spike protein on the surface of this virus or given through a lipid nanoparticle in mRNA is the same issue. So fundamentally, that's the issue. The issue is the spike protein. Now, the spike protein gets a little more complex. There's a thing called S1 and S2, where the tip of the spear is S1, and that tip of the spear is what actually binds to the receptor of the cell membrane of your body that has ACE2 and gets into the cell. So whatever delivers that spike protein, whether it be infection or the vaccine, to every part of your body, when you put it into a lipid nanoparticle, that can go all over the place, including across the brain. So I do know that there's evidence that people have long COVID having never got an infection because you can measure the thing called the nucleic capsid antibody in their blood. And the nucleic capsid only comes from the virus. And if you just have long COVID with no nucleic capsid and all you had was a vaccine, then the long COVID comes from the vaccine.
Wow.
So there's a scientific way of differentiating two. So the short answer is both, because both create a spike protein. Then the question is...
yes, keep going.
Then the question is what's happening to that spike protein? And that's another lengthy, basic, fundamental cellular
But here's my question. So if I wave my magic wand and I make you head of FDA, let's just go for Health and Human Services. You're in charge of all of it.
Okay.
Tomorrow, would you say we're bringing this to market and anyone who's had COVID or the COVID vaccine should take this jab, take my jab, this BioStrike thing?
The answer to that is already on the market, crazy enough, for bladder cancer. It's already in the package insert that this is the only drug on the planet in the history of medicine. It's in the package insert, section 7.1 of the FDA of the 2024 approved, that it's the only molecule on the planet that upregulates the natural killer cell, T cell, and memory T cell. So that's what's frustrating to me. And we got expanded access. And after
But wait, I didn't hear you say yes. Are you worried? Is there a downside to taking this that you would say, no, not yet? I would not recommend that.
I'm not hesitating to say yes. The answer is yes, but I don't want to be perceived as you ask a question in a way that puts me in a difficult position because I am the founder and developer of that drug. I'd want anybody to use anything, even whether it be mine or anybody else's. The fact that ours is available, the answer is yes. But if there's an ACE2 decoy available, the answer is yes. If there's another molecule,
like, is this something you give to your family, your children? Like you would?
Well,
is that something you would do?
I'm not talking about my family, but I am telling you that we have T cells against COVID.
So this T cell you're saying can solve the problem for people? Like I've said openly that I started testing positive for an autoimmune issue following getting the COVID vaccine and then COVID within 3 weeks of each other. And ever since I've had a positive test for autoimmune, though it's unspecified, they don't know exactly what it is. So, I mean, I've been very interested in undoing that somehow, but I don't know how. But I know others are suffering with this just from having had COVID. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who, like, can the damage that we did to ourselves, either by getting a vaccine or by getting COVID, can it be undone?
Yes. The answer is, I believe so. So let me explain that to you. The fundamental problem with the current vaccines is it does not clear the virus. By that, it means the vaccine will block something, but the virus will go into the cell. The next fundamental problem, which has now been proven, and I funded that science at the University of California, San Francisco, that this virus at the spike level persists in your body, in the cells, even to the extent that now at Harvard, there's a researcher discovered that the spike protein is in the blood. And when you have this abnormal protein and with an abnormal RNA in your body will find a way to create antibodies to try and block that, and this is the onset of autoimmune disease. The combination of persistence, inflammation, and one more thing, the loss of a thing called P53, which is in your body to protect you from having cancer, that triple whammy is a prelude to cancer. That triple whammy is a prelude to autoimmune disease. That prelude is a prelude to brain fog. So is the answer to find a system that upregulates your NK cells and T cells and clears your body, those cells, of this infected spike protein. So that is what we are embarking upon on the treatment of long COVID. And I'm pleased to say that within the next couple of weeks, our trial will be open where people with long COVID could come and get the jab.
Wow.
But the fundamental thing, Megyn, is the world needs to recognize that we've gone down the wrong assumptions for 75 years. We have thought that we could, using tools of war, poisons like nitrogen gas, and that became the chemotherapy, poisons like radiation, that if we could nuke the tumor without killing the person, we would be able to win the war. We're nuking the tumor and we're nuking the natural killer cells and T cells. Now think of this vicious cycle. We give chemotherapy, we give radiation, we do a CBC, we see that, oh my goodness, you have anemia because we created that. Though now there's a drug called Epogen. We give you the Epogen so that you can get more chemotherapy so that you can wipe out more NK and T cells. We then look at the patient's CBC again and says, oh my goodness, you've lost your neutrophils. There's another drug called Neupogen, which we give so that we can give you more chemotherapy so that we can wipe out more lymphocytes and NK cells. Think of that madness that we've been doing. If we said, why don't you go do leaching, use leeches, I think 20 years from now, maybe less, we'll say, why were we doing that to the patient's body? When you go to the FDA, guess how they ask you to develop the drug? They use this term called MTD. What is MTD? Maximum tolerated dose. Find the maximum tolerated dose. That's the dose that we want you to give, just below the maximum tolerated dose. That's the current thinking of the FDA. It's not talking about any human being. There are some people there that are still perpetuating that. They're still there. Then they say, okay, because this maximum tolerated dose is going to nuke it, we look at the response rate, meaning the shrinkage of the tumor. Well, do you want to look at the overall survival because the tumor will shrink but the patient will die? No, we're not really interested in overall survival as an endpoint. Can you imagine that? That is today's thinking.
I can imagine it, because that seems to be our choice. It seems to be a willing choice because we've gone so long without making much progress on the cancer front. And I naively believed with the COVID vaccine that if there were some negative consequence to it, and I realize you're telling me to COVID too, but I thought with the vaccine that was man-made, well, so is the COVID vaccine, COVID virus, that the pharmaceutical companies that had created it would be first in line to fix it, that they would be the ones coming up with BioStrike, because they'd say, oh no, look what we did. We helped unleash this thing into people's blood and it's affecting the brain barrier and everything. And they haven't. They don't acknowledge that there's a problem whatsoever. They're still just pushing 27 boosters on the same people they, jabbed to begin with.
Well, what's so disappointing, very early on, they knew about the myocarditis. That's really disappointing. They knew about that. Very early on, I wrote letters and emails to Fauci in 2020, 21, that we have lymphopenia, that we don't clear the virus. Very early on, they knew they didn't clear the virus. But, you had the perception it was 95% efficacious, which it wasn't. So there's a lot of, perverse incentives here. And I think we just need to recognize, unfortunately, the consequences of it now.
This is why Fauci needed a pardon. That's why he needed a pardon. Do you have thoughts on, you treated Beau Biden or tried to help the family when he was suffering with glioblastoma. What do you make of Joe Biden's statement that he had prostate cancer, that, now it's aggressive bone cancer, metastatic?
Obviously I don't know the details, and I don't know if you just saw, we are now seeing prostate cancer in 40 and 50-year-old kids. And there is, coming back to the spike protein, there is a enzyme in the prostate called temperase. There's a protein in your body, in the prostate and the colon, in different parts of the body, that helps to actually cleave that spike protein and get it into those cells of your body faster. So now you have a triple whammy of this turbo cancers and these aggressive cancers. So I just spoke to Dr. Dan Petrulik, who's at Yale, a urologist, who's seeing very aggressive germline tumors, very aggressive prostate cancers in young people.
Did you say 40 or 50, or did you say 14 and 15?
In prostate cancer, 40 or 50. In colon cancer, we're seeing colon cancer in 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and 12-year-olds.
That's horrifying.
And that's what's so scary, right? Because we need to pull our heads out of the sand and try to understand what's going on and not get into this regulatory political issue or fight and say, listen, we got to pull together and really look at solutions now, and time is not on our side.
All right. Now, we're up against the end of our time on SiriusXM, but I have to say the following. Number one, we'll talk about the LA Times another time. This is too important. This is far more important than media. Number two, I know all those characters we just discussed. I know Marty, I know Jay, and I know Bobby Kennedy, who I know you also know. I'm going to personally contact all three of them and do what I can to help you get this in and get the government involved in helping you, because this is the cancer moonshot and you've got it. Like we're well on our way. So that's what I'll do. And I will do anything else I can to help you, Doc. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of what you've done. And I'm also deeply saddened that you haven't had a red carpet rolled out for you. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And you've now gone from BioShield to BioStrike. So Tucker had called it BioShield and you're calling it BioStrike. We'll call it both.
I kind of like BioStrike. That might be better to combat the strike protein, among other things. Thank you. Thanks, Doc. Okay. And I hope we talk again.
Will do. Thank you.
Wow. An unbelievable story. Unbelievable man. Stand by. We'll have more. We'll have Kelly's Court tomorrow. We'll see you then.